Be still for a moment, not because you are calm, but because the noise has finally exhausted you. If you are honest, you already feel it. A pressure behind the eyes, a restless hunger in the chest, a quiet panic that appears when the screen goes dark. You call it stress. You call it burnout. You call it being human in modern times. But that is not the truth. The truth is harsher and simpler. Your mind is being trained to collapse, not by enemies with weapons, not by tyrants with chains, but by comfort, by endless stimulation, by the gentle erosion of attention, by a world that never tells you to stop reacting. You live in an age where everything speaks and nothing says anything worth remembering. An age where silence feels threatening, where stillness feels like failure, where being unseen feels like death. You wake and reach for the device before you reach for your breath. You measure your worth in numbers that refresh every second. You borrow your identity from strangers who do not know your name. And you call this freedom. Listen carefully. The ancient warning was never about external collapse. Civilizations fall all the time. Empires rise, decay, and turn to dust. That is not the tragedy. The real collapse happens earlier, inside the individual, when the mind loses command of itself. A weak mind does not break all at once. It softens, it bends, it avoids discomfort, it learns to outsource responsibility. It becomes offended easily, frightened often, and certain of nothing except its own confusion. You are not overwhelmed because life is hard. You are overwhelmed because your mind has never been trained to stand alone. In 2026, the world does not demand your strength. It profits from your distraction. Algorithms do not care if you are wise. They care if you are predictable. Fearful minds scroll longer. Insecure minds buy more. Angry minds share faster. And every moment you spend reacting is a moment you are not ruling yourself. This is not a conspiracy. It is a marketplace. And you are the product. The old philosophers would not be surprised by your anxiety. They would recognize it immediately. They saw it in emperors surrounded by luxury and in crowds intoxicated by spectacle. They knew that when pleasure becomes the highest good, resilience becomes unnecessary. And when resilience disappears, collapse is inevitable. You have been told to express everything, to vent, to externalize, to explain yourself endlessly, but no one taught you restraint. No one taught you how to sit with an unpleasant thought without obeying it. No one taught you that not every emotion deserves a response. So now your inner world mirrors the outer one, chaotic, loud, crowded, and fragile. This is not a motivational speech. Motivation fades. This is a warning. Calm, precise, unemotional. If you do not govern your mind, something else will, and whatever governs it will not care about your dignity. You think the danger is artificial intelligence, economic instability, political chaos, or cultural decay. Those are only accelerants. The real danger is that your inner structure is too weak to withstand pressure. A disciplined mind can live through disorder without becoming disordered. An undisciplined mind collapses even in comfort. Right now, millions feel strong because they feel supported by noise. But remove the noise and watch how quickly panic appears. Watch how quickly they reach outward for validation, outrage, reassurance, or escape. Strength is not loud. Strength does not announce itself. Strength is the ability to remain unchanged by what does not matter and fully engage with what does. The future will not be kind to minds that cannot endure boredom, uncertainty, or restraint. The future will belong to those who can stand alone in their own thoughts without flinching. And that is the test placed before you now. Not tomorrow, not after the next update, now. The central insight of Stoic thought is not denial of emotion nor cold detachment from life. It is sovereignty, inner rule, the understanding that while the world may remain chaotic, your judgment does not have to follow it. The Stoics would look at 2026 and recognize a familiar pattern wearing new clothing. Excess information, excess opinion, excess comfort. A population overstimulated and undertrained. They would not criticize the tools, they would question the unexamined dependence on them. To them, the problem was never suffering. The problem was unnecessary suffering created by false beliefs, especially the belief that external things should obey your preferences. In modern terms, this means believing you should always feel good, always be validated, always be understood, always be entertained. When those expectations are violated, as they inevitably are, the mind reacts with anger, anxiety, or despair. The Stoic mind does not ask the world to become gentle. It trains itself to become unshakable. Control is not about domination of others. It is about mastery of perception. Two people can face the same event. One collapses, the other sharpens. The difference is not circumstance, it is interpretation. A weak mind hands interpretation to the crowd. A strong mind claims it back. The ancients would say that you suffer more in imagination than in reality. Modern psychology agrees. Catastrophic thinking, rumination, and emotional reasoning magnify pain beyond its source. But where psychology often seeks relief through expression, Stoicism seeks strength through correction, not suppression. Correction, you are not your first thought. You are the judge of it. And if you abandon that role, your mind becomes a courtroom without a judge. Every impulse shouting, every fear testifying, no verdict ever reached. Responsibility is the prick, E of inner freedom. That is why it is avoided. It is easier to blame systems, trends, trauma, or timing. But blame keeps you psychologically young. Responsibility matures you. The Stoics would say that suffering becomes optional once you accept what is not yours to control and take ruthless ownership of what is. Your attention, your response, your character, everything else is weather. Most people do not fail because life overwhelms them. They fail because they have trained themselves to escape at the first sign of discomfort. Comfort has become a reflex. Pain has become an insult, and any demand placed on the self is interpreted as harm. This is not compassion. It is weakness disguised as care. The mind, like the body, adapts to what it repeatedly does. If you repeatedly avoid difficulty, your tolerance for difficulty shrinks. If you repeatedly indulge impulse, impulse becomes your master. If you repeatedly react, reaction becomes your identity. You cannot think clearly in a storm if you have never practiced stillness. The Stoic does not seek hardship for its own sake, but neither does he flee it. He understands that resistance builds form, pressure reveals structure, and that without internal discipline, freedom becomes chaos. Look closely at modern distress. It is rarely caused by starvation, invasion, or exile. It is caused by comparison, anticipation, and the constant negotiation of self-worth. These are not external tragedies, they are internal misalignment. People suffer because they want life to feel easier than it is, because they believe discomfort means something has gone wrong, because they expect the world to cooperate with their preferences, but the world has never made that promise. The Stoic mind asks a different question, not why is this happening to me, but what does this demand of me? That question changes everything. It transforms obstacles into training. It turns delay into patience. It turns loss into perspective. It turns silence into strength. Modern humans chase comfort because they confuse pleasure with peace. But pleasure is restless. It always wants more. Peace is still. It requires less. The more you depend on stimulation to feel alive, the more lifeless you become without it. A disciplined mind does not need constant affirmation. It is rooted. It does not broadcast its struggles or harvest sympathy. It works quietly, corrects itself, and endures. Restraint is not repression, it is selection. Not every thought deserves belief. Not every emotion deserves expression. Not every impulse deserves action. When you act on everything you feel, you are not authentic. You are enslaved. The Stoic understands ego not as pride, but as fragility, the need to be seen, the need to be right, the need to be praised. Ego is not strength, it is dependence. That is why criticism devastates the undisciplined mind. That is why silence feels like rejection. That is why disagreement feels like attack. A strong mind can be misunderstood without panic. It can be disliked without collapse. It can be alone without loneliness. This strength is not dramatic. It is quiet. It is built in moments no one applauds. In choosing not to react. In choosing to wait. In choosing to do what is right without needing recognition. Delayed gratification is not a productivity trick. It is a philosophical stance. It is the declaration that the future self matters more than the present urge. Emotional control is not emotional absence. It is emotional clarity, feeling fully but obeying selectively. The modern failure is not emotion, it is indulgence. Stoicism does not promise happiness, it promises resilience. And resilience is what allows happiness to appear without fear of losing it. From a distance, modern humanity looks busy but directionless, connected but fragmented, informed but unsure, loud but uncertain. Social platforms reward reaction, not reflection. They train the mind to perform rather than to be, to curate rather than to cultivate. The result is a generation fluent in expression but poor in judgment. Fear of judgment now shapes behavior more than moral reasoning. People do not ask, is this true, but will this be approved? And slowly, character is replaced by consensus. Loneliness grows not from lack of contact, but from lack of depth. When every interaction is filtered, edited, and measured, the self never fully arrives. Digital addiction is not about pleasure, it is about avoidance. Avoidance of boredom, avoidance of self-examination, avoidance of the uncomfortable, silence where growth begins. The Stoic watching this would not rage against technology. He would observe the misuse of attention. He would note that the greatest theft of the age is not data, but focus. To reclaim the mind is to reclaim the self, not by retreating from the world, but by no longer letting the world dictate your inner climate. Judgment will come. Let it, noise will rise. Let it, trends will shift. Let them. The question is whether you will shift with every wind, or stand firm enough to feel the wind without moving. The weak mind demands safety before it acts. The strong mind acts and builds safety through competence. In the years ahead, uncertainty will not decrease. Complexity will not simplify. Those waiting for clarity before discipline will wait forever. The Stoic does not wait for conditions to improve. He improves himself until conditions matter less. And that work is invisible. No applause, no metrics, just a steady refusal to surrender the inner citadel. If you feel uneasy listening to this, that is not an accident. It means something inside you recognizes the truth, not as comfort, but as challenge. And challenge is the beginning of strength, because when the noise fades, when the systems fail, when the crowd panics, what remains is not your opinions, not your possessions, not your image, but the quality of your mind. And whether it can stand on its own when everything else falls silent and you are left alone with your thoughts, your choices, and the weight of the moment that asks, without mercy and without noise, whether you trained yourself for ease or for endurance, whether you spent your attention freely or guarded it as the most precious resource you were ever given, whether you learned to rule yourself or merely learned to cope until the next distraction arrived and the next one and the next, until one day there is no distraction left in the mind, untrained and overfed on comfort, finally meets reality without armor and realizes, too late, that strength was always available, always waiting, but required something you kept postponing: discipline, restraint, responsibility. And now, standing here, feeling the pressure without escape, you begin to understand what it means when a weak mind does not shatter loudly, but simply gives way, quietly, internally, the moment it is asked to carry a weight it was never prepared to hold. The end does not arrive with drama. There is no announcement, no signal, no collapse you can point to and say, this is the moment it happened. The true ending is quiet. It is the moment you realize that your reactions now happen faster, your judgment. That your attention slips before you decide where it goes. That your emotions lead and your reason follows, apologizing afterward. That your inner world is no longer ruled, only managed. This is how a weak mind finishes, not in failure but in surrender. The Stoics understood something modern culture resists, that the most dangerous prison is the one you do not feel, when your impulses feel like freedom, when your habits feel like personality, when your distractions feel like rest. By then, nothing external needs to break you. You are already fragmented. A strong mind does not need hope, it needs clarity. Hope is what people cling to when they refuse responsibility. Clarity is what appears when responsibility is accepted fully, without negotiation. The clarity is this: no system is coming to save you from yourself. No technology will give you discipline. No philosophy will work unless it is lived. No amount of insight will compensate for the absence of practice. You either train the mind, or it decays. And decay does not look like madness. It looks like dependence, on reassurance, on stimulation, on explanation, on constant input to avoid the unbearable task of sitting with one's own thoughts without escape. The Stoic end is not happiness, it is stability. A center that does not move simply because the world does. A self that does not dissolve when approval is withdrawn. A mind that can endure boredom, delay, silence, and uncertainty without demanding relief. This is what strength looks like in 2026. Not aggression, not dominance, not noise, but composure. The ability to pause when provoked, the ability to choose when tempted, the ability to remain intact when misunderstood, the ability to act without needing to announce it. You do not need to become harder, you need to become firmer. Hard things shatter, firm things hold. The future will test attention more than intelligence, emotional regulation more than opinion, discipline more than talent. Those who cannot govern themselves will be governed by trends, by fear, by crowds, by whatever speaks the loudest at the moment, and they will mistake that obedience for normal life. But some will feel the discomfort early, some will notice the fatigue that no rest cures, the anxiety that no explanation solves, the sense that something essential has been traded away for convenience. Those are the ones standing at the threshold, not of enlightenment, not of superiority, but of responsibility. Because once you see the problem clearly, innocence is gone. You cannot unknow that your suffering is amplified by your interpretations. You cannot unsee how often you hand power to things that deserve none. You cannot pretend that discipline is oppression rather than protection. From that moment on, there are no excuses, only decisions. The Stoic does not ask for a lighter burden, he strengthens the shoulders. He does not ask for certainty, he trains adaptability. He does not ask the world to be quiet. He learns to be unmoved by noise. This is not asceticism, it is alignment, to want less approval, to fear less judgment, to react less impulsively, to endure more deliberately. In doing so, life becomes simpler, not easier but simpler. Fewer inner negotiations, fewer emotional debts, fewer moments of self-betrayal disguised as self-care. When you rule your mind, you do not need to control outcomes. You respond well regardless of outcome. That is freedom the modern world rarely understands. Because it cannot be sold, it cannot be broadcast, it cannot be measured, it can only be embodied. And embodiment is lonely at first. There is no crowd for restraint, no applause for patience, no reward for silence in a culture addicted to expression. But there is something else, dignity. A quiet confidence that does not depend on timing or trend, a sense of self that remains when the screen turns off, a steadiness that others feel but cannot name. This is why the Stoics warned rather than comforted. They knew the mind's default direction is downward, toward ease, toward avoidance, toward entropy. Without deliberate effort, weakness is not chosen, it simply happens. So the warning stands, unchanged by centuries. If you do not command your mind, it will obey whatever is nearest, loudest, or easiest. If you do not train perception, reality will feel hostile. If you do not cultivate restraint, desire will exhaust you. If you do not accept responsibility, resent him. Envy will grow, and resentment left unchecked turns inward. It becomes anxiety, bitterness, meaninglessness. A slow withdrawal from life while still participating in its surface rituals. This is the collapse no one films, yet the opposite path is equally quiet. It begins the moment you stop asking how to feel better and start asking how to be stronger. Not stronger than others, but stronger than yesterday's impulses. It continues each time you choose not to react, not to indulge, not to explain, not to escape. It deepens when you realize that peace is not found, it is built through repeated acts of self-governance. And one day, without ceremony, you notice that chaos still exists, pressure still comes, loss still happens, but your inner world remains ordered. You are no longer pulled apart by every demand. You are no longer dependent on constant reassurance. You are no longer afraid of silence. At that point, the warning has done its work. Not because the world changed, but because you did. And from there, nothing needs to be said loudly, nothing needs to be proven, nothing needs to be chased, only maintained. Because strength, once built, is not dramatic. It is quiet, watchful, and prepared, standing there without announcement, aware that the next test will come as it always does, unexpectedly, without permission, asking the same simple question it always asks, beneath all the noise and distraction and comfort. Did you train your mind, or did you let it weaken while you were busy elsewhere?